had some inkling there from work that Dave's doing and others have done around the necessity of sharing the .lc file that comes with an observation. It's a genius piece of development that turns a very big, enormous AVI file into something that's very compact because you're not saving all of that black sky and other stars and stuff that's not relevant to the experiment to allow for very efficient information transfer. So, big disclaimer: this is intended to be a talk to go through how to get the best light curve out of a video. As the person that receives everybody's report, you see some good light curves, you see some pretty damn scary light curves, and on the way through, I often do a bit of nip and tuck and improve the quality of the light curves. Often the data's there, it's just how well has it been extracted by Tangra to pass on. And so what I wanted to do was a very quick cook's tour of the quite bewildering array of features within Tangra to tune things up, which I'm sure most of you don't use, and I don't use, and give you a little bit of background there so you can enjoy your improved light curves yourself without me tweaking them up and sending them back to you just to these things. But as it turned out, I didn't know much about what was going on in there either. And in the course of writing this PowerPoint has vastly improved my knowledge of how to use Tangra. I won't have got everything right. It's in generalizations. Please jump in and contribute your own experience and tell me where I get it wrong. Okay, so we're not taking pretty pictures, we're taking video. By and large, we're trying to determine two things: a disappearance time and a reappearance time. But increasingly, as this last talk that Dave just given, we're doing photometry at times for certain types of objects. And when you press the start of the recording process, you don't know whether you're going to need to do that stuff later on or not. It might be a simple DNR, or you might be up for quite a bit of work. And I want to stress that you can't rescue a bad video with Tangra. Don't pick any old settings on the camera and expect Tangra to salvage a quality light curve out of it. Make sure yes, we're trying to do time, so time resolution is important. Get your exposures as short as practicable, but you still need a nice clean signal to do the photometry on. Interesting point there, Dave, that I probably don't comply with very well about keeping the star bright enough to know whether you've got a double star or a double asteroid. I tend to let my star images go fainter in the interests of better time resolution. So a bit old school there, and maybe I need to pull my socks up. The other one, which I think is a bit of a sleeper for us, and I'd be interested in Dave's comment on this, is the use of gamma. Now, when you're doing photometry, you're assuming that something twice as bright in the video is twice as bright as something else, that relationship is genuine. You start playing around with gamma and you will destroy that relationship. So a gamma of 1 means brightness on the input is the brightness on the output, and your relationships are preserved. I routinely run gammas as low as 0.5 or 0.4, stretching the faint end to make the contrast for faint stars more dramatic from a video perspective. But if you're comparing it to something at the bright end of the field, the relationship will be invalid.
I do the same, but this is an example where, for any of this stuff, the use of comparison stars addresses that.
If you use something that's genuinely comparable.
Yeah, it's got to be, and we have had examples where the target star is in Sagittarius area was a blue star and all the comparison stars were red.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah. Saturation, please avoid saturation. I do get a surprising number of videos come through where stars are saturated. They don't need to be. It makes the photometry, it compromises the photometry. It also means you probably took a longer exposure than you needed to, and you could have had better time resolution.
So having the time when you're setting up
Yes.
Can be pretty critical.
Yes, whether you're there or not. So when you open a video in Tangra, I must confess, in my practice, if I've done an integration, I'm using an analog camera. This doesn't apply for digital, but I'm using an analog camera. I actually convert my file AVIs to AAVs before I do anything, so that I don't have duplicate frames. They're all unique frames. If you come from a digital camera, you'll already be there. Don't worry about it. I let Tangra loose on the stars without mucking around with any of the photometry settings. I'll generate an LC file, and then I can do quick reprocessing to tweak and tune into a quality like that. So my suggestion is just run it with the default first time round, and then worry about all this stuff later. So you've got a whole pile of adjustments in here, and I'm just trying to work out which bits I'm going to drop out of this talk. But you've got basically three parameters: a reduction method, which is deciding how you're going to do the photometry; a digital filter, which is going to decide how you deal with the noise in the background of the image; and then you have a background process to decide how you want to relate the background to your target object. And you have a choice in these. That's the default setting: aperture photometry, no filter, and an average background. Now, Haristo doesn't have a help file telling you what each of these things are, because Haristo didn't invent any of this. These are conventional image processing tools, and Victor, with his dark sky imaging, is probably all over them from his other activities. So read around. The internet's got plenty of stuff on how these things work. But as I said, I run through the first time round, and then with the LC file, use the quick reprocess process. So quick word about selecting targets and comparisons. I heard a lot of this discussion already about choosing comparisons that are similar to the target for the purposes of the double star work. There's a conflicting agenda here. I almost always use select fixed relative to guiding stars. That's not the default. It should be the default, in my opinion. But anyway, that's not the default. When you do that, the measurement apertures for the target star will stay fixed relative to a number of, and then you select some guiding stars to go with it. And in that practice, I generally choose relatively bright guiding stars because they're nice, strong signals. Depending on your focal length of your imaging, this may or may not cause grief. I have had times where the seeing has been so poor that the guiding stars are actually moving in the wobble relative to each other and dragging the aperture around inappropriately. That's rare, and especially if you're using shorter focal lengths. But yes, the risk is if you don't select that and you've got a long occultation, while the target star is gone, the measurement aperture wanders off and cases noise or latches onto another star, and bad stuff happens. But as I said, as Dave's indicated, when you come to build the case for a double asteroid or an unusual event, you may need to come back to your primary video, rerun it with a different set of comparisons for that exercise. So that one's, you run the photometry, you get a light curve like that, leave it alone. That's perfect, right? Don't mess with it. That was one from a couple of weeks ago, my place. You don't have, that's just the default settings. Now, if I pull this talk up now, I want to tell you one thing that you need to do or suggest that you do. And I didn't intend to do this as a actual demonstration with Tangra, but I'm going to pass on that now, is get the aperture right. The default settings in Tangra invariably are much, much bigger apertures than the star image itself. And you can almost always greatly improve the form and quality of your light curve by shrinking, I can use a mouse, can't I? By shrinking the aperture right down. So you've got this profile here, which is a point spread function, and you tap this thing down until the blue dots are the pixels that are going to be considered in the measurement. The grey ones outside are the ones that are outside the aperture and are not going to be considered in the measurement. Tap this down until you're well onto the base of the slide. Don't worry about your comparisons unless they're going to be part of the photometry, but do it for this one. And then you do the quick reprocess. If I had Tangra open, I'll show you there's a menu selection for quick reprocess. It will take a few seconds depending on your computer and how long the file is, and it will rerun the photometry with that settings. And you will find that a light curve that is noisy and a bit ambiguous about the disappearance will sharpen up a lot just on that alone. I do this to a good proportion of the light curves that I get sent. But that's, if that's anything you remember from this afternoon, leave it at that. Ignore me for the rest of the talk.
Yeah, especially for faint stars.
Especially for faint stars.
Faint stars are better with smaller rather than trying to bend the light because of the noise.
Yeah, you're just measuring sky, you're just measuring noise in the background. Now, my habit of using low gammas means that I usually have quite noisy backgrounds, and you want to keep that out of the picture.
In that sense, I often have a large background, so you've got a better mean value over the background.
For the background, but not for the measurement.
Small measurement,
Yep.
large background.
So this is a really crappy graphic I made in a hurry, sort of mapping out the options under those three blocks of photometry measurements. You have an aperture photometry measurement, which is simply drawing that aperture, counting the pixels inside it, and adding them up. The two other options for reduction method are PSF, point spread function photometry. You saw the green lines on that previous slide. That's a function that's been generated on the basis of the blue dots. But you actually do the photometry on the basis of the green line, not the dots.
Have you ever had success with PSF?
Rarely. So there are cases, and that's what I wanted to talk about this afternoon, but running out of time. And then the third option, which is a bit of a mystery, optimal extraction photometry. There's not a hell of a lot around on what this is about, but it's to my mind, despite what the website says, it's a bit like PSF, but it makes a bunch of assumptions about the nature of the star. You've got a barely there signal. It will assume it's a normal distributed form. So its strength is really faint stars. I have had one event where this was better. Variable star people get a bit more excited about this because it can give them better, more consistent results for faint stars. For us, it's probably not such a big deal.
If I can interrupt, my experience with that thing is it's based on brighter stars and not good on faint.
That's not how they pitch it.
What I suggest with that, all right, is if you've got a noisy light curve, you try out to see which gives you the cleaner light curve.
And that's probably the take home at the end of this. Have a play.
I thought it was for small drops.
It would be because it would be more, it's not specifically to small drops, but again, it might work if it's a more precise measurement of the value when you need the measurements.
It's less noisy, it's good.
Yep, that's always good. The digital filter is around smoothing the image. The options being no filter, low pass filter, and low pass difference filter. So no filter is probably going to be your default. You should only really be going here if you've got a really gritty, noisy background that you're trying to extract the star out of, particularly like a low gamma type image. Think of it as a blurring. It is literally blurring the image and smooths the background. It's just the background is dominating the photometry. That's a good way to get rid of it. But you will also be blurring your target star. I'm not absolutely sure how this differs from this. My suspicion is that this is blurring within an image, and this is actually looking at noise image to image.
Yeah.
So I've seen some where I've had spikes, and it will take out a spike in the middle where there shouldn't be one. Background, this is probably a little bit more of a black art. You've got some basic statistical ones, average background, median background. I don't know what background mode is, and these guys are clearly
another type of averaging, isn't it?
What's that? Background mode? Oh, mode.
Yeah, mode.
As in mean, median, and mode. There you go. You got it all.
They're all average.
I was thinking mode.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that because I had a discussion with Russo about that. technique he picked up from some paper. And my understanding is that it will look for anomalous pixels and knock those out.
Okay, that's sort of self-cleaning.
Yeah, but that then, yeah, the mode is which ones are more common, so you'll map the ones that aren't very common. So it's the mode, yeah.
So on the question of PSF, so point spread function is commonly advocated for crowded fields. So the point spread function with that green curves and the profile of the star image. If you've got a crowded field and you've got star images that are literally overlapping, PSF will tease them out. Now, I actually have an example I'm going to play you of a downtown Sagittarius occultation with Quaho in a super stupidly crowded field. And I didn't need it. It had enough distinction that if you set those apertures right, aperture photometry will get you out of jail 99% of the time. But that's one of the things that PSF can do for you. That's what we're going to say about that. There is some value sometimes if you actually have a saturated star unintentionally and you want to project what the top of it was. PSF does assume that there's the top chopped off and we'll bring that into the maths. That's nice sometimes. It's also extremely dangerous because the star images flutter in size in the scene. When they're big, it'll say, oh man, that must be incredibly bright. And so your light curve will have these spikes on it. So PSF often produces totally spurious spikes up high and low. So it's there, use it when it's right, but I'd be surprised if there's a need to use it a lot. Right, so this was, going to run some examples. Aperture photometry, yep, measure the pixels from the cell. I've probably effectively talked this. So these are the point spread functions that Tangra is generating. When you're running Tangra, you can see the little squares in the top right-hand corner, and normally the default is you see the star image. You can change that to PSF view and look at what that green curve looks like. As you pan through the frames, you'll see that the green curve flutters around, shrinks and grows, which is where the PSF noise can come in. And we'll talk about the Quaho example. Optical extraction, I think we've talked about that. Filter selection. CMOS cameras being so quiet, I would have thought that the use of filters is probably diminished, but not necessarily always. If you're really, really stretching a friendship and trying to drag something out of the noise in the background, maybe. And background selections, yes. Again, I haven't seen a lot of patterns as to why one would work better than the other. When you go through the frames, you'll often see that there'll be, if you see a drop or a spike in your light curve, sometimes it will be the light curve. Dave talked about the example where the measurement aperture jumped off the star. I've got examples where just the background pixel got a bit bright and they just led the maths away for that one. And sometimes a section of it, an alternate background mode, can get you out of that. But yes, the take-home message is play. Have a muck around. Even if you just send me the default, go have a play yourself. There's lots of options there. You don't need all of them, but some of them can be effective in surprising cases. Okay, that was quick.